Hello, everyone. My name is Kristen Dooley. I'm director of Women Against Military Madness. We are a feminist activist group that is against war, and we are conducting our annual meeting. The way this works is we start with a presentation having to do with something that's current and that's important to us now. And one of the ways we're doing that this year is because it's our 40th anniversary, we are going to talk about how we continue to have hope and we continue to see progress and how we are learning from and sharing with younger activists in newer activities that help us learn how to be hopeful and to see value in the work that we do and in the work that we do with each other. So with that, I'd like to introduce Wham's office manager, Katie Davis.
Hi, everyone. We just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that today we are on Native land. Everything that we do, the land that we stand on, is fundamental to Native American identity and spirituality. So we wanted to take a moment to honor the Dakota and Ojibwe communities. And we also encourage you to critically reflect and have conversations with your own community about these topics. So yeah, we just wanted to honor that.
And we'd like to go to one of our co-chairs to introduce our speakers.
Hi, I'm Jo Schubert, co-chair of Wham, and I get to introduce our speakers today. After 40 years of activism, Wham is looking to young activists to show us how their actions are continuing the push for peace and justice. This gives us hope.
Good.
This is behind you.
Oh, okay.
We are grateful to these young people for their willingness to speak with us about the groups they represent and their activism. Our speakers today are Tasneem Abdullah, a board member of American Muslims for Palestine, Minnesota chapter, Daniela Kunkel Linares, youth organizer with Climate Generation and the Youth Environmental Activists, Jay Yates, an organizer for TCC for J, Twin Cities Coalition for Justice for Jamar, and field director of Minneapolis Control of Police, and Katie Davis, Wham office manager. They self-identify as an intersectional, feminist, queer, and anti-ableist, anti-racist individual. We are looking forward to hearing what you all have to say.
Good morning. Thank you for the introduction. I am going to share my screen in 1 second. Yeah, my name is Tasneem. I am from Minnesota. I grew up in Minnesota and I live currently in Iowa for grad school. My parents are Palestinian. And my grandparents and basically everyone in my family is Palestinian. We're from a small town called Tarshiha. It's way up north in Palestine. I probably should have put a picture here for you guys. And it's kind of on the outskirts of Acre. And so my grandparents were ethnically cleansed in 1948 and ended up in southern Lebanon. So my dad grew up in a refugee camp until he was 7 before they were able to move out. And then my mom was much younger, so she also was able to live in southern Lebanon, and that's where they grew up. And they have always been very they've really worked on instilling our Palestinian identity within us, and that's just been really the foundation of where my activism started from. You know, we watched Al Jazeera news all the time. That was like the only thing that played on our TV. And so being like a kid here, and I moved here when I was 7, so I kind of had a half experience of like that immigrant experience plus kind of growing up here. So being a kid and like watching kids that look just like me on TV being mistreated, you know, I want to say, I think I was like 8 or 9 when like Muhammad al-Durra was killed, and he was if you've seen the iconic image of like his father with his arm around him. And so watching that growing up really kind of hits you and kind of like a why am I here, and why, like, what's the difference between me and these children who are also Palestinian? The only difference is that they, like my grandparents, you know, escaped or were able to escape this violence, not by choice, obviously. It was still ethnically cleansing regardless. And so when I got to college, I was texting a friend and I was like, let's grab lunch sometime. And she was like, hey, there's this thing happening for Palestinians. And I was like, oh, I'm Palestinian, I'll go. It turned out to be a group of girls that wanted to start Students for Justice in Palestine. And so I joined in, and we ended up starting the organization back in 2011. And so I guess this would have been a good first picture. I didn't get to go to Palestine until 2015 because of kind of the history that I just told you. My parents were never allowed in. And we don't have family there anymore. And so I was able to go through a youth program, and that was my first experience and my only experience there. So that was 2015 in Jerusalem. And so back to 2011, we started kind of organizing protests. We had little cute bake sales. I see this picture on Facebook and I'm like, what is this? And then I see myself in the back and I'm like, that's why it's showing up. And so we would protest for Palestine. Back in the day, we weren't as big on social media. And so we did things like writing on whiteboards. And so we had people write why they support Palestine. And so not supporting all human rights is hypocritical. They deserve the best like everyone else. They're human. And then this is someone whose family had been imprisoned for, you know, political imprisonment for no reason. There's plenty of Palestinian stories that imprisonment happened for no reason. And then back in 2012, it kind of died off. And so I kind of started harassing people and I was like, hey, do you want to join a board and like revive it? And so that's what we ended up doing. These are all my friends who I still like, I'm really close to. I still, you know, a lot of you might know Miriam, and I still, Mariam al-Khatib, I still organize with her to this day. And so it's been 10 years of working together. And so I harassed her and I was like, hey, do you want to kind of come to SJP with me? And Yasmin and Rola, and actually Rola has her own story, but Sadiq also, I harassed him to join me. And so we ended up kind of reviving the board. And then like Yasmin and Mariam still like make fun of me to this day for this, but like Rola came in and she was like, hey, like I am interested and I'm Palestinian. And I was like, yeah, okay. And they were like, how do you just like let everybody and anyone join in? And that's always been like my rule of thumb, that if you want to work on this cause, if you want to do anything for it, as long as you show up and you do the work, I don't care who you are. I don't, you know, there's always a seat open on the table. Like on our table, the door is always open. People have joined in meetings and then never showed up again. People have joined in and ended up showing up every day. And Rula was one of those people who showed up, and I had never met her before. And I was like, yeah, come on in. And she ended up leading divestment like 2 years later. So like, for me, I think, you know, how I ended up in SJP is through a text to a friend to go grab lunch, and then I ended up somehow involved with this organization. And so having an open door has always been like my policy in all organizing. And so that year was the year that we did our mock apartheid wall. And since then, SJP has been very active on campus. And so a lot of you probably have seen the work that they currently do. And so divestment was one thing that, like, has definitely changed since like the beginning of when I was working on when I started working on Palestine work. And now, when I first started, we like never brought up divestment. It was something that we kind of like talked about behind closed doors because we didn't want it to be like sabotaged and we didn't want to be targeted for it. And now divestment is a lot more, it's a lot more common. So UMN divest happened in 2016. It was like a whole thing where someone basically, again, sabotaged it. And they ended up doing it again in 2018. And I think the like foundation of divestment and foundation of Palestine work in general is just like collaboration. And so a lot of other organizations worked on this effort as well. I had already been graduated, long graduated at that point, but yeah, I went back and I would go back and do like panels with them and do workshops. I mean, the same committee that did the UMN divest was like, I worked with them on like workshops like years before that. And so it's kind of like it takes a long time. It's a process to like build these movements, but as long as you're patient, you'll get there, right? And we see that with like now after, you know, going into the community and doing work, we see that with advocacy work. I mean, we would have never been able to imagine having like a congresswoman who was so pro-Palestine, and now there's multiple congresswomen who are so pro-Palestine and speak up like unequivocally in support of Palestinians and Palestinian human rights. And so there's always that conversation of, well, does advocacy work even work? Does it matter if you go and talk to these congressmen and women, they don't care about you? And while there's like some truth to that, that it's, again, it's just building day in and day out of just showing up and doing that work. It's not the only thing that we do. I don't think that showing up to Congress's offices is going to free Palestine, but I think it's still work that needs to be done. We need to face our oppression on all fronts, essentially. And so that we did Palestine Advocacy Day. One thing that, again, we work really hard on, and I personally think is key in terms of like building movements, is accessibility. And so one thing we did for Palestine Advocacy Day is we put out scholarships, especially for like students, but I mean, anybody who would have reached out, we would have probably been able to find funding for them because it's expensive to go to DC. And so that was, I think we had 10 students that day. And since we've had, I mean, Palestine Advocacy Day went from like 250 people to 500 people the next year to like 1,000 people the next year. And so it's been a consistent growth. And we've seen how the response has changed. Like in 2019, when we went, Tina Smith's office, for example, it was just kind of like this conversation that ended up her staffer ended up talking about the donuts he got in West Bank. And it was just kind of like, all right, this is not a very like helpful conversation. To this last year's Palestine Advocacy Day, we saw that they realized that we were showing up consistently. And even though it's still the same case of they're not particularly going to do anything you know, life-changing here, but we saw that the response was different. We saw that they were more receptive to what we had to say. And then, okay.
One before.
So yeah, so advocacy work, we've definitely seen a change in the response we've gotten. Something that we do consistently, again, is Palestine Convention. This is a lot more education-based and culture-based. And so we take folks out to Chicago. We have a really fun time on our bus. I think for us, organizing, engaging people in different ways has been really important. And I always tell people when they kind of like more fun events, is that's how you bring people to everything else. Like that's how you engage people so that you can bring them into your protests, into your into your advocacy work, and into like campaigning. And so a lot of folks that, you know, came to Palestine Convention and like had a really good time have been helping us with like campaigning for boycotts, for some of our boycott campaigns. And so something else is education. Palestine Book Club, again, it's very engaging for us. We have conversations and it just creates this safe space for people to talk about their experiences and about like reflecting on our current reads. So today we actually have book club later today at 6 p.m. if anyone's interested. But it's been one of our favorite events, just being able to talk about something that we're passionate about with people that are, you know, are also passionate about it. And there's also obviously you don't have to be Palestinian to show up, but having people from all different backgrounds kind of helps move the conversation forward, because we get to hear multiple perspectives as well, and we get to learn from each other. Olive Harvest event is one of those other moments of like culture preservation, and so this is something that I also really like to invest in, but we as an organization invest in. It's kind of bringing in the youth and bringing in multiple generations. And so this is one of the board members' grandmothers who's 80 years old, and this is one of the kids that came to the event who was like, I think 8 years old or something like that. Yeah, so marching for Palestine last year when Sheikh Jarrah was at its prime, we went to DC for the National March for Palestine, and then we also had protests for Palestine here. We decided that we wanted to have the biggest protest for Palestine in Minnesota, and we made it happen. We brought 4,000 people out to protest for Palestine. I'm so sorry, I have the world's worst Wi-Fi. I think maybe I'll try to talk without the pictures and see if that helps not slow me down. Yeah, so protesting for Palestine has been huge for us. I think for us, there's a picture that I was showing right before I dropped off. I don't know if you guys were able to see it, but we were praying at a protest. Showing up as you are has been like really big for us as well. And for me, in terms of like creating my own identity and finding who I am as a Palestinian, as a Muslim. And it's hard to show up as you are in all spaces sometimes, but I'm learning, and I think that's something that I really like want to pass on to future generations as well, of show up whole, show up as who you are, and never give up like parts of who you are to fit into spaces. No space is worth it. If a space makes you have to give up your identity, whether it's as a Muslim or as a Palestinian, it's not the space for you. Walk out. And I think that's something that like is just really important in like all aspects. I think whether it's at university and organizing spaces, especially nowadays. So yeah, engaging people in terms of different events and different protests has been really good. Social media has been really nice in terms of like helping give out more like information. The only thing is that social media is just kind of one small tool. The biggest way to engage people for us has been to that's always been the case. So talk about, yeah, so and boycott campaigns have also been really successful for us. It's also been a way to engage people, but also a way to give them action items. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was investing in our future. As you know, I know we're brought in as like the young folks to talk about our activism, but there's generations after us that have already started working and being active. And so Youth for Palestine has been huge for us. And so giving youth space to organize and yeah, so Youth for Palestine has been huge for in terms of cultivating like that spirit in the next generation, giving them space to do their own organizing. They put on probably one of the biggest events we've seen in a while, and it was a Skate for Palestine event, and 200 people showed up, and that was entirely youth-led. So I think for like me, what I would say coming in as someone who's continuing to organize is always leave the door open for folks to come in to do the work. There's never, there's always room for more people to do work. There's no reason to, make it difficult for anyone. And it's so important to, yes, thank you for the putting that in. I don't know if this is that's not the right Youth for Palestine. Sorry, I'll put that in. I'll give you guys a link after, but that's not our like the arm of AMP that we work with. But yeah, so really just leaving the door open, being creative, engaging people in multiple ways has been really successful for us. We're seeing change. It's slow, it's very slow progress, but we're seeing the change, and we're hoping that we know that this won't be we know that that Palestine will be free. We know that Palestine will be liberated. We come in every day doing this work with 100% belief in our liberation, and that keeps us going day in and day out. And yeah, and I think that's what I hope to continue with my work, and to continue with investing in our youth, that our liberation is coming, and so we won't stop until it does. And thank you for tolerating my bad internet, you guys. I'm so sorry about that.
Sorry about that, but thank you for coming back.
Of course.
That was dedication. Thank you so much for joining us and explaining everything that you did. That was really good and encouraging, and hopefully gave some people some new ideas of things that they can do too, and maybe some things that they might join you on now. So next, we're going to move on to our next speaker. We have Daniela with Climate Generation and Youth Environmental Activists. So let's see, are you able to? Okay, cool.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for having me here. It's really exciting to be with you all. And I also really wanted to say thank you for Tasneem for speaking. It was just really good to hear from you. My sister's in SJP this year, and it was just really sweet hearing about the beginning of it all. And I think something that like really connects our stories, and probably a lot of people who do youth work, is just dragging your friends to different things, and your friends dragging you to different things, and that community really building powerful networks of youth organizers. And I also really remember just the energy that the divestment campaign in 2018 had on the U of M campus, and that was the first time I ever learned about Palestine. So I want to thank you for that work, because that was like you starting SJP and like doing that work that created such an energy on campus around Palestine. So I don't have a presentation, so I'm just going to talk. I hope that's okay. My name is Daniela. I use she, her pronouns. I graduated in the spring from the University of Minnesota, and I'm now working at Climate Generation with the Youth Environmental Activist Program. And yeah, kind of like how I got into this work is I am a first generation Peruvian American. My mom immigrated here in the 90s, following a really violent Maoist uprising in Peru. And just she kind of similar to Tasneem's story, like my mom was really lucky to be able to leave Peru. And that's not the same story for a lot of people in Peru. She was really lucky to be accepted into a grad program here. And that's something that I really do feel and resonate a lot with. And yeah, I grew up going on trips to Peru and just seeing the effects of climate change in the global south, and seeing how drastically different it was from like me spending time outside here in northern Minnesota. It was just two really different experiences and really different realities. I didn't really get started, like I was never a youth organizer when I was in high school. I didn't really get started organizing until the uprising. I got together with a group of students in Bloomington, and we formed the Bloomington Anti-Racist Coalition. And it was me, my sister, and another like alumni who kind of decided to like take on like mentoring these students and figuring out how to organize together, because none of us had organized before. And that's when I really realized like man, high schoolers don't have much of a space to bring about powerful change. And high schoolers are really cool and really, really powerful and can do a lot of things. And so with these high schoolers in that first summer, we organized like one of the biggest protests to ever happen in Bloomington. And we like shook things up in Bloomington. There was a lot of conversations happening in Bloomington around anti-racism. And I think a lot of that was following the uprising and also like maintaining that conversation and sustaining it and having a group really dedicated to that. And young people really focused on that. We saw a lot of conversations in the schools, conversations around having ethnic studies and stuff that had never been talked about before. And so, yeah, I've been doing that work for around 2 years now. And then last year around this time, actually, one of the friends that I work on BARC with went up to Line 3 and encouraged me to come with him. And that was the first time I had ever really seen the destruction of Earth like that here in the States, and not, I was really familiar with it in the global South, but it was the first time I saw it here. And it was the first time I felt like, you know, all my trips to Peru were just trips, like I wasn't staying there. But seeing that happen here, and knowing that I could have, you know, long-term involvement in a campaign to stop Line 3 became really important to me. And I think one of the things that I want to talk about with Line 3 is just how many young people I saw up at the front lines, and how many young people I saw working together to build community. And I think like the people that I met doing Line 3 work are the same people who I can constantly rely on to support the high schoolers I work with. And these are like probably 19 to 23-year-olds that like I can really rely on to support the 14 to 18-year-olds that I work with. And that is really meaningful, and really powerful. And I'm really, really grateful to have had that experience. And so now I work with YAMM, and that's the Youth Environmental Activists. And I get to like do that for my job, which I feel really lucky about. But it's a group of high schoolers across Minnesota just working together to take climate action. And I think the biggest thing I do with them is like mentorship, and we just have conversations, and a lot of it is like emotional support about the things that they're experiencing in their activism or the things that they're experiencing at school, and just like talking about those things together. And so I kind of have my hands in a couple of different places, but it is all with like working with young people and encouraging them to do this work. And I feel really lucky to be trusted by young people. And so when Chickpea was telling me about this event, I know something that she mentioned was hope. And so I do want to talk about hope and like how I see that being a really beautiful tool that young people have such wonderful access to. And so I think like something that people talk about with young people a lot is resiliency, and how resilient young people are. But I think we need to start dreaming about a world where young people do not need to be so resilient. There shouldn't be so many things that are being thrown at the faces of young people that require such speedy recovery. They should be able to just be young. In the past couple of years, just working with young people, I've realized that what gives young people and what gives us as a fellow young person our resiliency is our ability to choose to be hopeful. Hope is a discipline. I think we need to choose to be hopeful. And I want to read you something by Mariam Kaba. She's an abolitionist, and she writes, "It's work to be hopeful. It's not like a fuzzy feeling that you have to actually put in energy, time, and you have to be clear-eyed, and you have to hold fast to having a vision. It's a hard thing to maintain, but it matters to have it, to believe that it's possible to change the world." And I think, speaking really honestly, like there's a lot of days where I don't feel very hopeful. I don't have like a warm, fuzzy feeling that everything's going to be okay. I don't really feel it in my heart or my body, but I know that hope is something I really value. And I know hope is something that I really choose to hold on to. And hope is the only thing that really keeps me going. And in moments when I can't feel that hope, I know that it's something that if I put my time and energy and values into that, that I can dream of a better world and I can help co-create it. So I'm reminded that hope is a discipline, and I'm reminded that young people, that as young people, we are able to hold on to that discipline more than anyone in the world because we can tap into that a little bit easier. And so really how I do this work is constantly reminding myself to be hopeful and that I need to hold on to hope, but also like really examining the way that I view young people, even as a young person myself, like what have I been told about what young people can and can't do is something that is like something I've really had to think about. And so I think the biggest thing that I do is like just critically being in community with young people. I think a lot of times like we view the young people in our world as parts of their parents or parts of their caregivers. And that doesn't really allow us to see young people as their full autonomous selves that they are, as community members, as young people who deserve respect. I think every single person should be concerned with the well-being of young people in the same way that we are concerned with the well-being of everyone else. Youthhood is often an oppressed identity, and it's often also a political identity to be young and to choose to be young and to where was I going with that? Yeah, to be young is like, it is an oppressed identity. No one thinks that you have what it takes to make change. No one thinks that you deserve respect. No one thinks that you can make your own decisions. And so I think like we as like older people, and even myself as an older young person, like we need to investigate that. What are the like prejudices that we are holding on to about young people and what they can do? I think also like that really comes with interrogating yourself. How do you hold yourself in a higher position than young people? And I think the only way to do that is to just talk to young people and to realize that they have plenty of capabilities on their own to make change. And so I think also an important aspect is making community spaces accessible to young people and all young people. Oftentimes when you have youth positions on a board or something, it's only accessible to white affluent young people because they don't have to work after school or they have the means to get to meetings and stuff. And so how are we making our spaces accessible to all young people? I know that's something I really struggled with as a youth organizer, especially when I started, because I had zero money. I had no money. I was in college. I was paying my rent. Like I was really struggling. And the only thing I could offer was like one slice of pizza every 3 months to the young people for like the incredible work that they were doing. And now I'm lucky enough to work for a nonprofit that we can offer stipends for students for the work that they're doing. And I think that is like an investment. It is an investment in our community as young people. And so kind of starting from a slice of pizza and working up to a community so built in trust is one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced in my entire life. And I know that like as these high school students that I've worked with graduate, that will be something that we have together forever, is the community. And I think that's the biggest thing in like youth work and bringing in young people. I think that's all I have to say. So I just wanted to thank you all for just inviting me here to speak. It has really been an honor getting to know Chickpea and Garbanzo specifically, and just like the work that you all do together here in Wham. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Daniela. That was very inspiring to me. Your definition of hope was very meaningful, and how we envision young people was very good advice. So then thank you for speaking. The next person to speak on our list is Jay Yates, for an organizer for TCC for Jay. Are you
Hi,
ready?
everyone. So I'm gonna attempt to share my screen. I don't know if it's actually gonna work, but Yeah, actually, I think I'll just stop. It's fine. Yeah, my name is Jay. I am an organizer with Twin Cities Coalition for Justice for Damar. I'm also the field director for Minneapolis for Community Control of Police. And so kind of like my work with TCC for J is 100% related to the work that a lot of the same people do in Minneapolis for Community Control of Police. And so kind of our current initiative that we're working on is getting a charter amendment on the ballot for we're trying for 2022, but if we can't get enough signatures for by the deadline in the end of April, then we'll just keep collecting signatures into 2023. But yeah, basically kind of how I came to TCC for J and this work is I actually graduated into the pandemic, and I started doing mutual aid work, and kind of with that, I wanted to be more politically involved than I was in college. In college, I really only had the time to kind of like participate in other people's political events, like when Philando Castile was murdered. I was kind of involved with student actions around that, and also went to one of my first protests that was actually organized in part by TCC for J. But after graduating, I really felt passionate about being more involved in community organizing. And so I joined TCC for J for the Pride 2020 organizing committee. And I ended up helping organize and MC Pride, which was wild as like a brand new organizer. It was like very much being kind of like, you know, thrown into the ocean. Your dad's like, hey, like time to swim. It was very much that. But yeah, I've kind of been doing it ever since. And I think that TCC for J is really an organization that I think really puts like action behind theory in a way that not all groups that do anti-police work have. And so that's kind of like what's kept me in TCC for J as an organization. So with kind of what youth are doing in TCC for J, there's actually a lot of us that joined for Pride organizing. And I think that's something else that's really great about TCC for J is that it's a really like multi-generational and actually like really queer-led and Black-led organization. And so we've really been able to like attract and retain newer activists and people who are ready to do the work, and most of those new additions have been young folks like I guess myself. And so yeah, so right now we're working really hard on kind of Cpac Outreach, and kind of getting people in the community to know what Cpac can do for them, and also kind of like explaining to people what Cpac is. So some of you may have heard of the Yes for Minneapolis campaign. And while that was happening, TCC for J was getting kind of like compared to that a lot, and also sometimes confused as Yes for Minneapolis. And so like a lot of the community outreach work that we've done has kind of been explaining Cpac and its origins in a way that people can like start to understand like why we're fighting for this as opposed to other reforms, or you know why we're going for a community-based approach as opposed to trying to get more power for the mayor, those kinds of things. And so I did want to kind of talk a little bit about Cpac and what it is today. So I'll try to keep it brief instead of doing our whole Cpac presentation. So for folks that don't know, Cpac stands for Civilian Police Accountability Commission. And it's basically the expression of like self-determinative power, right? So basically the Cpac is an all-elected, all-civilian commission that would oversee the police in Minneapolis. We're not the only place that is trying to get something like this passed. Chicago actually last year was able to pass their kind of first round of charter language to get Cpac enshrined in their charter, which was really amazing. And so we've really been kind of trying to build off of that momentum with our campaign here. And so, yeah, the Cpac, one of the things that is really kind of important about the way that we've written our legislation is that everything that the Cpac can do is like explicitly enshrined in the charter language. So, for example, I think one of the major concerns that we and other people had about Yes from Minneapolis was that a lot of the things that were being kind of promised weren't actually written in the charter language. It was kind of like, oh, we could do this if we had the minimum police officer requirement reduced, which, I think that for us, we were like, the MPD and the Police Federation are too powerful to kind of leave that to chance, that like we need something more concrete, and whatever we put into our language has to be like in stone if it's going to have any like staying power. So we've worked really hard to talk to community members about some of the things that they feel need to be in the legislation. And so a couple of those things are having the Cpac have hiring and firing power. So as opposed to now when like city council has never really had any say in who gets hired on the police force. Even the mayor doesn't really have much direct say in the hiring process of police officers. But with the Cpac, we would be able to do things like, not hire cops from other precincts or other states that have, 10 or 15 or 20 complaints against them. We can also fire cops who have a certain number of complaints or after a certain severity of complaint. So, for example, with George Floyd's murder, Derek Chauvin under Cpac would have been fired a long time ago before he ever interacted with George Floyd. So the Cpac having the power to kind of like take community complaints seriously and actually investigate them is something that's been really important to people and is a huge part of our legislation. One of the other things is being able to be a part of budget negotiations. So currently, basically the Police Federation submits a budget proposal, much like they just did a couple days ago, and then City Council pretty much rubber stamps it. There's not really any actual negotiation or bargaining with the Police Federation because they just have so much power and influence. Under Cpac, it would be part of Cpac's the Cpac's duties that are outlined in the charter for them to be a part of budget negotiations. So yeah, without getting too far into the nitty-gritty of the legislation, those are kind of some of the things that we were hearing from community and kind of incorporating. And yeah, in terms of like maintaining like community investment in this project, I think for us, like really stressing that this is about giving our community's self-determinative power is kind of like central to how we've been bringing people on board, because I think that people are really ready for something tangible and something that's like more than just like empty promises, right? I think with the Cpac legislation that we're working to get passed, we want to make sure that like it's not this sort of like top down process of like, you know, we tell the community like this is in our proposal, and like if you don't like it, then like good luck, I guess, you know, like really involving community members, and especially like talking to youth is something that we do a lot with Cpac. Talking to youth about like their interactions with police, and like helping them understand like not just what their current rights are, but like what the Cpac could do for them specifically, and how it can transform the way that they're forced to interact with police. Because I think for us, we know that we can't get rid of police, you know, tomorrow. And so they are kind of an unfortunate part of our lives at this moment. And until we have the time and space to imagine a world without police, and to actually like implement a world without police and replace them with something, we need to have control over how they operate in our neighborhoods, and how they are disciplined when they don't follow the law. So yeah, that's kind of Cpac. And then with regard to like the theme of today of hope, I think yeah, I think it's hard to be hopeful when you're doing anti-police crimes work, because it feels like this is a problem that's been around forever. It feels like we've been like under the boot of police forever, and there's, you know, just this like long list of people that have been taken from us by policing. And I think that for me, I definitely get very like, you know, is it really like, can we actually do anything about this? And I think that something I found a lot of resilience in is just the fact that we have been able to recruit like younger and younger people to fight this fight with us. I think that the youth have really moved past the like, you know, imagine a better world stage of actually being like, you know, what can we do now to ameliorate this problem, and like what can we set up for the future. And I think that Cpac is really kind of setting us up for the future, setting us up for a future where abolition is actually possible, and where abolition and, you know, defunding and all of these things that people clearly want are in the hands of the people that are affected, rather than the people that have the most power. And so I think that really gives me a lot of hope that we are actively taking some of our power back as a community. And specifically for Black youth, I think that's really long overdue, for us to have that kind of self-determinative power. So yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have to say. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You know, Emma had to close her computer for a few minutes and re-enter because she was freezing up. So I'm just going to jump in. Or Joe, do you want to go ahead, Joe? And
Okay.
thank you to Jay. Sorry.
Thanks, Jay. That was definitely a good summary of Cpac, and we appreciate all the work that you're doing, and that fills us with hope as well. The last speaker for today is Katie Davis, and she is Wham's office manager, and she has a lot to say about her own self-identity and what she's doing with that. Thank you, Katie.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to be speaking about the LGBTQ plus community today, and I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here so y'all can see the presentation that I prepared here. All right, here we go. My name is Katie Davis. We'll just share a little bit about me so y'all can get to know me. Let's see here. My name is Katie Davis. Like I said, my pronouns are they, them, and I often have purple hair, as you can see. I've been an activist for 10 years, beginning with organizational work in my school surrounding the LGBTQ plus community, and then branching into further activist work for a variety of causes like Black Lives Matter, reproductive rights, immigrant rights, intersectional feminism, supporting teachers, and overall just better mental health support systems as well. And then, of course, protesting militarism around the world. In addition to being an office manager at Wham, I'm also a professional massage therapist, writer, photographer, and model, and chronic illness baddie. So yeah, here we go. Like many kids in the LGBT community, I was visibly queer early on. I would wear what was considered boy clothes or do what was considered boy activities, and overall just found myself very uncomfortable with femininity at that time in my life. I didn't want to wear the color pink, and I didn't want to wear makeup, and instead I preferred to have burping contests with the boys and chase them down on the football field and things like that. I was what was called a tomboy at the time, which is kind of funny to a lot of us now. Everyone assumed that it was a phase and that I would eventually grow out of it. And people sometimes even tried to discourage me from exploring this part of my identity. And it turns out that over 2/3 of LGBT youth experience someone in their life trying to change this aspect of them or steer them away from that aspect of their identity. I remember some of my family would put me in dresses and tried to teach me how to be beautiful and attractive to men. And I remember there was a point in my life where someone in my family actually gave me a whole like bowl cut, like all the way around my head to discourage me from, you know, exploring masculinity and having short hair. Of course, I burned all the pictures from that time, but I found a good example of what it kind of looked like for me. Of course, I didn't pull it off as well as this cute kiddo in the picture here. But yeah, there was just a lot of expectations that I would grow up to marry a man, and I would grow up to be a mother and perhaps have a college education and job if I wanted to, and how progressive that I would get to do that. And that's what I thought I wanted for a long time, was to be a wife and a mother. And it wasn't until my 20s that I was able to truly explore my own inner world and what I wanted out of my own life and how I identify, as well as how I can present in ways that feel more authentic to who I am. And I also noticed that when people couldn't tell my gender when I had shorter hair and I wore boy clothes, it often made some people uncomfortable because they didn't quite know how to interact with me. Would they call me sweetie and darling and tell me how fine and pretty I look that day? Or will they ask me what I want to do with my life, what sports I'm interested in, if I'll be a heartbreaker someday, like they say to many young boys. And they often would just make more eye contact with me in general and had more respect for me even as a young kid if they were viewing me as more masculine. So I always thought it was very confusing how someone's genitals could drastically change how other people present to them and how other people treat them. And in middle school, it was a whole new world compared to elementary school. People started hanging out in cliques, and I just didn't really know where I fit in. People started making comments about the clothes I was wearing and the things I was doing, shouting after me, writing obscenities on my locker. all the classic middle school bullying. And so I learned to kind of suppress this side of myself. I wore baggy clothes, I kept to myself, I listened to music, and I found quite a bit of comfort in that. It made me feel more seen and just supported in who I was, even if I couldn't really feel that in my environment. And eventually I did start to find other kids who just didn't quite fit in either, and we formed a little friend group. But as I started exploring dating and sexuality, I shared my bisexual identity with the wrong person, and they told the entire school. All these rumors started going around, and the bullying only intensified after that. As the age of Facebook began, people sent me horrible messages, death threats, physically chased me out of locker rooms and bathrooms, excluded me from activities and groups. But thankfully by this time, like I said, I had 2 other queer kids who accepted me for who I was, and we would take care of each other and help each other through these very difficult experiences. I also had online friends all over the country who were queer and going through many of the same things I was. With things like shaming, abuse, religious rhetoric at home, as well as difficulties feeling safe at school. Eventually, I began organizing an LGBT group at my middle school created to support and uplift queer kids. We wrote letters to politicians, hung posters up around the school about bullying, got LGBT books and movies into our school and library, and we also gave speeches to staff about LGBT bullying and suicide rates, as well as how they can be better allies to those kids. Through the better treatment and support of LGBT kids, they truly can save lives. LGBT kids are significantly more likely to skip school due to safety concerns, as 70% of queer kids are bullied. They're also 5 times more likely to commit suicide than their peers, with a whopping 40% of all queer kids who have considered suicide only in the last year. And for reference, that is hundreds of millions of kids who are struggling with suicidal thoughts, depression, isolation, and things like that. Queer kids are also more likely to be homeless, with 40% of homeless youth identifying as LGBT. It's not easy to walk your truth, and these kids pay a steep price through bullying, trauma, abuse by authority figures like parents, teachers, and religious figures, and even police. 58% of transgender people report being assaulted by the police after coming to them for help. So there are many long-term implications of this type of mistreatment. Additionally, I also feel it's important to note that these statistics are undeniably worse for LGBT students of color, because not only are they growing up in a society rooted in racism, but they now face an additional layer of discrimination. This is yet another reason that activism in all its forms must center the BIPOC community. BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. Education and learning about institutionalized racism and using these activist platforms to improve the lives of these communities should always be a #1 priority. So just representation of LGBT adults, and like I said, especially BIPOC LGBT adults specifically, is important for our communities. These kids deserve support from adults who understand their experiences. And as an LGBT person growing up, I also wished for more role models in my life at that time. I currently mentor 3 younger people in the LGBT community who go to schools around Minnesota. One of them goes to a private school, and in the back of my mind, as we were talking about their coming out process and wanting to, just kind of step into this authentic self, I feared for them. With their Catholic family similar to mine and their private school based on religious principles, I anticipated that they would have a really hard time coming out. That they would go through some of the things that I did. But I was happily surprised to learn that their middle school already had a flourishing LGBT group and supportive teachers as well as friends. This is something I didn't experience almost 15 years ago in the public school system, and it's something I want for more public schools. It's something I worked to cultivate in West St. Paul and then kind of in the surrounding areas. I think we need better mental health support in schools and more support for teachers in general, many of whom are doing everything they can to protect and support these kids. I owe so much to the teachers I had growing up who saw the queer kid in me, and they wanted so dearly for me to have a good life and to be safe. And they are the reason I'm still here. They're the reason I fight for these kids now, especially with some of these laws happening around the country. And this is just a little bit about, me kind of building up this community myself that I wanted to see, and just being very happy that there's more representation of this now. So some examples of the bills being passed around the country. One of them is the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida, which many of us already know about, but this prohibits teachers from discussing LGBT topics. It also limits resources for LGBT youth and allows student officials to out students to their parents without consent, which can be very dangerous for many kids. And all this concern is that it's like sharing inappropriate information with kids, while Disney movies, constantly show examples of heteronormative couples, and yet kids are still turning out gay. I mean, just look at these examples here. This is what we see growing up. These are the examples that are provided to us, and yet kids will still build their own individual identity as they grow. I just think it's funny that even the hetero dogs are allowed to kiss, like I just thought that was silly. But yeah, there's also the Minnesota Parents' Bill of Rights, and this would force teachers to change their lesson plans based on parental opinions, and also limits the accurate sharing of information about the US history of slavery and roots in racism, the theft of land and many abuses of Native American peoples, as well as sharing LGBT history. This bill demonizes teachers who already love the children, protect them, educate them, and advocate for them tirelessly. LGBT kids are no different from others. They deserve the same representation and care, and to learn about their history and the people who have been doing work in this field for many, many decades. So I do believe this is one of the reasons, among just the lack of support for teachers, that Minneapolis teachers are out there raising hell in the streets, because they deserve better, and the kids do as well. Texas is another one that has started a government mandate allowing parents of trans minors to be investigated and potentially prosecuted for child abuse, which is terrible. There are also laws going on being discussed right now that would make it illegal for doctors in many states to provide gender affirming care to trans minors, as well as bathroom laws that would force trans students to not be able to use the bathroom that aligns with their gender, which is also dangerous in terms of bullying and the frequent assault of LGBT kids in schools. And then these are a few bills here that block trans kids from participating in sports that match their gender. All of these states right now are discussing laws that would ban this kind of participation, which is very sad to see. I also wanted to talk about how activism has changed over the course of the past few years, and why I'm excited to be a part of this movement. Of course, there's always room to improve, and there's always, need for more spaces, but I found that there are more LGBTQ+ specific spaces than there were 10 years ago. And there are also more spaces specifically for BIPOC LGBTQ+ folks. Many of my friends really benefit from having groups that specifically connect and relate to their own experiences of the world. There's more focus on sharing personal stories and experiences, and also just being more open about trauma. I noticed that the people in my life now are more willing to go to deeper places than the adults did with me growing up. So it's just really nice to see that. There's also social media. Not a thing happens quietly anymore, not a thing. Like when Congress recently pushed out a bill overnight that gave ICE millions of dollars more in funding, they tried to do it quietly, and it just blew up online. So it's really nice to see just more accountability, more awareness of what's happening around the world. And it's also the time of memes, which are kind of like funny images that make it easier to find the light in situations and connect to each other about activist topics, as well as mental health, chronic health problems, and things like that. It's a lot more personal, like I said, just being able to learn people's genuine struggles. I think there's also less burnout culture than there was a few years ago, and people are starting to move in the direction of self-care as a route to community care. In addition to validating life experiences, we also allow more personal agency and respective pronouns and things like that that allow for more room for self-exploration. Like, how do I feel about myself? How do I want to show up in the world? And as small as it may seem, using someone's pronouns could make or break someone's day. It could save someone's life. And it's as simple as referring to people in the way that they ask you to. This is one of my favorite memes as of lately. I wanted to give an example of kind of how the younger generations might communicate something, but this is an example of transphobic people using biologists as like, oh, it's just simple biology. And biologists are like, can't relate. So here are a few of the reasons that I keep hope personally. Activism is built on the bones of people who didn't like what they saw, and so they changed it. And honestly, I see a next generation of brilliance. When I talk with these kids, when I see what these kids are doing, I believe in them. I am in awe of them. I respect them. And every single protest that I participate in, I am undoubtedly brought to tears every single time. It's nothing short of gratifying for me to connect with others in this way, and also to connect with others via social media and to see artists using social media as a platform to make a difference. I really, really appreciate that kind of work as well. There are so many ways to change this world, even from small interactions, like talking about it with others, treating people with respect and kindness, and larger efforts like calling, emailing, or writing to government officials, sharing on social media, and showing up at protests for those who are able to. There are lots and lots of people who still care. There are people who choose peace. There's good in this world. And I really try to see it every day, even when I'm so discouraged, even when I'm really struggling or down about the state of the world right now. But, you know, when people smile at me on the street, or when one of my friends gives me a big hug, I try to just hold on to that feeling and try to kind of spread it in the world around me. At the end of the day, I always have these moments of stillness where I try to ponder like what peace feels like inside of me, just being this one person in this one body, just silent for a few minutes, trying to imagine what it looks like, what it feels like. What sensations does it bring up for me? I notice the capacity of this feeling to expand all around me, and I just imagine it getting bigger and bigger. And I really just want peace for our hearts whose love and empathy extend so deeply to others. I want well-being for people around the world. And something in me knows that these quiet moments can stretch to various corners of the world, you know, not just where we all live and dream and fight and imagine a better world, but I know that it someday can wash over our land and continue to expand to other places. So I very much have hope for this world. And I, like I said, I'm very much in awe of the people who are fighting, both in my generation and the younger ones as well. So thank you so much. That's what I have to share today.
Thanks, Katie. I feel so fortunate that you're the Wham office manager, and thank you for telling us your personal story about identity and all that's going on with the LGBTQ community and advocacy for those people as well, and your hope. And I want to just thank all of you, all of the speakers, for sharing your hope, giving us hope, sharing your stories and your strategies, and giving us ideas, sharing your creativity. We are grateful to every single one of you for being here today. And I'm going to pass it on to, I don't know who's next. Is it Kristen?
Might be me.
Oh, it's questions and answers. Kristen.
Oh, that's right. Oh, Kristen is doing Q&A.
That's
Yeah,
right.
sorry. I'm ahead of myself.
And Joe, can you mute? Because you've got a little bit of feedback on your mic when you're not
Oh,
talking.
thanks for telling me that.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry, I was having trouble. Can you all see me and hear me now? I was muted
Yes.
there for a while. Thank you all, wonderful speakers. I do want to mention one thing. It is hard for some of us older people to get used to pronouns, and I have deep respect for Joe and deep respect for Katie. But in her introduction, Joe did use she pronouns for Katie, who prefers they. And I don't know, Joe, you want to say something? And Katie, let it slide, but I don't think we should. So thank you all.
My apologies, Katie.
Thank you. Yeah, I have very deep respect for both you and Kristen and Joe. Thank you so much for saying something.
Okay. Now I'm going to open up for questions. You can put questions in the chat, and we have a few minutes. I think it's going to be hard to have questions because these people, all four speeches were so tremendously inspirational. And it's hard to question somebody's inspirational talks. But please, if you'd like to know more about their organizations or want to specifically talk to some of the activist treatments, please, activist activities, things they're doing differently this time around, please. I'm not seeing any questions. And if I don't, I'll assume that every speech was perfect and that we can move on. So I do want to say, I'm going to put in the chat I can't do it now. We have a very robust annual meeting page on our Wham homepage. And if somebody else would put it in the chat, because apparently I am not able to do so. But that will come up with, we have upcoming events, and I'll see if I can share my screen. Maybe that'll help.
You should be able to both share your screen and chat. You're authorized as a co-host.
Okay, here we go. I'm just slow then. Now you're seeing my screen, and what we have here is we're now at upcoming events. We have quite a few events upcoming, and these are the ones we collected up until yesterday. First of all, Wham does vigils. Every 4 days a week, we're out doing weekly vigils, and we have them all listed here. There's the Monday Pipeline Blues Vigil, there's the Wednesday anti-war vigil, there's the Thursday morning ICE vigils, and Friday we vigil for Palestinian rights. So please come if you can, they're very important. Next, we have a very, we have a very active Latin America, and one of the groups in there called SCOTA, and one of the things they do is once a month they do a car caravan around Minneapolis to protest the US blockade of Cuba. And you can join us there. A lot of fun, a lot of cars, a lot of honking, and it's just a great way to show that we think the blockade of Cuba is highly illegal and we want it dropped. We also have upcoming sharing with the wonderful Eastside Freedom Library, discussion of US labor, the CIA, and the coup at Ford in Mexico with a local author who has written a book about what went on at the Ford plant in Mexico. So please come out for that. all of you have access to this website and can look at these events. Another event on Cuba is to talk about Dr. Helen Yaffi, who is an amazing author, will be speaking live from Glasgow, Scotland, about how Cuba has handled the COVID crisis. And they've done a tremendous job, and they've actually developed their own vaccines that they are giving away, which is unlike the very capitalist US way to doing things. We also have on Saturday, April 9th, our new local committee is doing Assange Defense. And I don't know if you heard, but Julian Assange did get married recently, unfortunately in the prison, but if anything resembles hope, that is certainly it, that he is continuing to fight this horrible mistreatment, and we support him. We had a group of a whole lot of people from Minnesota who went on a Code Pink tour to Cuba recently, and they're going to report back to us on that same Saturday, April 9th. So I hope you can come to that. Last but not least, we have the annual Walk Against Weapons. This is something that Wham has been doing for 15 years. It's a lot of fun. You get pledges to have people donate to you. This is a huge fundraiser for Wham. So if you can't come out and vote, find somebody and donate to their cause. It's really good. It's really fun. Last year, it was really hot. We had a lot of good times. And if you look at the front of this flyer, that's our very happy picture of the event. So those are our upcoming events. And now I'm going to turn it over to the co-chairs to launch our business meeting. But first, before I do that, can everybody just thank our speakers in chat and do your best to try and contact with their groups, and see you soon. Let me see if I can stop sharing my screen.
And I think that I was asked also to have a little word here, a thank you to so my name is Lucia Smith, and I'm secretary of the Wham board right now. I would also want to thank all of our speakers today, and I want to extend thanks to our staff people, Kristen Dooley and Katie Davis, and some people I'm thinking about who are not currently on site in the Wham office, and that is Soph Kelly Myers, who has left the Wham staff and is off on her career on the Eastern Coast. And we've been missing a very stalwart volunteer, and that is Fiona Radel. And Fiona is going to be coming back to the Wham office in April. We're so glad of that. I also want to thank all of you who have joined this event. And, you know, as Wham people concerned about military madness, of course, we are in pain, and we're looking at causes and tragic effects of the situation, the violence in Ukraine. And we thought about, as we were planning this meeting, focusing more on that international issue. But Wham, in our 40 years of existence, has always seen many, many issues as connected and interlocking. And that's why we wanted to present this hopeful morning of hearing from activists who perhaps haven't been around during the 40 years that Wham has been in existence, and are active right now and engaging in many different activities. So thank you. And Speaking of our speakers, our presenters, Wham has made the decision, and the planning group made the decision to present an honorarium to each of our speakers to say special, tangible thank you. And it will be a little more than a slice of pizza, but not a huge amount, but we would like to present an honorarium. So this is the money pitch for those of you who are listening, or those of you who are engaging on Facebook, or will hear the tape of the recording of this event. I encourage you, we all encourage you to send whatever you can as a donation to Wham to support and chip in on the honorarium for our 4 young people who spoke today. And you can send a check to the Wham office, mark it annual meeting or something similar, or you can call the office and give your information, or go to the website and find how to make a donation to Wham. And we would very much appreciate your helping out with this. So thank you so much, and let's carry on with moving toward the business meeting. Thank you.
All right. Let me try turning my video on. My Zoom keeps freezing. Hopefully I'll stay. So Joe and I are the co-chairs of the Wham board right now. So we're going to move on to the annual business meeting. You can stay for this portion, but it's the business meeting, so it's also okay, and I will not be offended if you leave at any point during this part. But we are calling the business meeting to order now. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to say, Joe, before we move on to the action groups and committees.
Nope, I'm good, but
Okay.
we can move on to the action groups and committees because that's next. And I am just simply going to list the action groups and committees. The reason we have 2 names is because we're kind of morphing from the name committee to action group, but some of the action groups have the name committee in them. So, we're both at this point. But we want to be thought of as action groups. So the action group committees of Wham are End Domestic Militarism, End Military Madness Against the Earth, EME, End War Committee, Middle East Committee, Movie Committee, St. Joan of Arc, Wham Peacemakers, Solidarity Committee of the Americas, Scotia. And that's our wonderful action groups. Okay, Emma.
All right, looks like next on the schedule we have meeting minutes with Lucia.
I'm coming. The minutes of the 2021 meeting were approved at a board meeting in May following that meeting. And I think that they were approved as they were corrected. So we don't need to take an action on those really today, but they would be posted along with the other materials from today's meeting. So thank you.
Okay. Is that all for meeting minutes, Lucia? I guess because you.
I think that can be it.
Okay. I will, I guess, introduce Chickpea and Garbanzo. So Joe doesn't have to introduce herself here. We're going to do the annual song now.
Yes, and it came up really fast, so give me a minute to get ready. I'm going to tell you the process that I went through in writing this song. First of all, the song is based on the melody from a former song. I was able to access some of the former Wham annual report songs, and this one was the earliest one I could find. It was by Phyllis Golden, and she presented it on March 13th, 1994, about the Wham annual report for 1993. And she did it to the melody of Hernando's Hideaway, which is a very difficult instrumentally melody to play. And so Garbanzo and I struggled with this for probably a month, and I think we've got it down okay. And I understand that all of you will be able to sing it as well. I don't know, Kristen, if the words are going to be put up so that people can see the words, or if maybe they have the
Yeah, I put the lyrics link into the chat. So if you go into
okay.
the chat and hit the link, you will be able to see the lyrics.
So please sing along, and I have to get my mandolin right now. The first one again is Phyllis Golden's song that she wrote for 1993.
What's the structure of this first one?
The structure is verse, verse, bridge, verse, bridge, verse, verse.
And just give me a nod if you think that bridges can.
Okay. Oh, just a second.
You accidentally unmuted or muted yourself, Joe. We love to see you, but we definitely have to hear you too.
Thanks, Emma.
There you go.
Okay, so we're all set. Let's see how we can do. We're Wham and we spent 93 opposed to junior ROTC. We rallied, talked, and interviewed and welcomed Rigoberta Menchú. We're Wham and we spent 93 breathing down the neck of NSP. We made connections, cut red tape. Our silence ends at midnight. Let's stop rape. Bridge. We looked at roots of violence, offered seeds of change. Rejected NAFTA in favor of free trade. We dealt it with isms and the problems that they caused. Protested very islands ways without a pause. We're Wham and during 93 exposed police brutality. We work for women and for peace and the creatures and the trees. Another bridge. We criticized the team down at the Metrodome. insisted the Redskin name had to go. We balked and balked at U.S. Balkan policy and helped the Jews and the Arabs see community. The Navy came invading Wham. No doubt we wakened Uncle Sam. They knocked 3 times and whispered love. We're not here because of Joe. We're Wham, and this was 93, as packed as any year could be. We skipped but ain't one interview but shrug. Let Barbara Carlson keep her own hot tub. Hey, hey, okay, we saved the day. We're Wham. Did that come through okay? Okay.
Yes, that was wonderful.
Thanks, Emma. So this is the Wham annual report for 2021. And I had a lot of help from Lucia on this, just giving me all the events that happened in 2021. And of course, my partner Garbanzo was very instrumental in this procedure as well.
What's the structure?
It's 3 verses. No, wait. Yeah. 3 verses, a bridge, and 3 verses. We're Wham in 21. We were for the UN ban on nuclear war. We opposed war without end. Sanctions on Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Iran. We're Wham in 21. We capably oppose police brutality. To stand with BLM, we were proud, and say the name George Floyd out loud. In 21 said no with indignation to police militarization. Sound cannons, pepper spray, tear gas, rubber bullets, and crash bangs gave all activists horror pangs. Bridge. Protested and bridge and the building of line 3. Said keeping oil in the soil was how it had to be. Because fossil fuel for the world is deadly. To stop protesting, we did refuse and sing the pipeline blues. We stood in solidarity with Cuba and with Haiti, pushed to end the Cuba blockade, posted the ambassador on Cuban Day. We're women in 21, demanded justice for Palestine be won, opposed General Mills' factory there illegally run, and Israeli assaults on Gaza frequently done. Polly Mann started Wham 40 years ago. Now she lives in San Francisco. Writes monthly for Southside Pride at 102. Parliament. It is amazing what you do. Hey, hey, okay, we saved the day. We're Wham. The end.
Yay, that was amazing.
Thanks
Thank you so much for that.
Okay.
So, that's great. I feel terrible that I have to follow that up with the financial report, which is
I feel relieved.
you're getting some good comments in the chat. I think everybody really enjoyed that. My cat actually did also. She jumped up on my lap halfway through the last one she's like, what's going on there? That sounds good. I think she also wanted to know why I was singing in the room by myself, which I don't normally do. All right, so I need to share my screen. I'm going to do the 2021 financial report and then the budget. You may notice that I am not Marie, who typically does this and has been doing this for a while. Marie is at home recovering from a medical procedure, so I volunteered to do this for her. So please, if I do anything wrong or not as good as Marie would have, I apologize in advance. Let me share. Okay. Can you see the financial report on my screen?
Yep, it's there.
Zoom in a little bit because it's tiny letters. Thank you, Kristen. And I see that Kristen just put the link into the chat as well. So you can always check this out on your own. And let me see. Marie gave me some notes. All right, so just follow along, I guess, look at the numbers and I'll highlight a few things here. Due to the unexpected income from two people who left a total of $32,400 to Wham in their wills, $10,000 from the children of Wham members who died that went into the donations category, and the fact that we received $20,000 more than we anticipated in the major donor category, some of which coincided with the delivery of COVID stimulus checks, our income is approximately $53,000 more than we anticipated, and we are incredibly appreciative of these unexpected donations. In terms of our expenses, I'll just move this a little bit. In terms of our expenses, due to staff raises and an increase of 5 hours per week in the hours of the office manager, salaries are up almost $9,000, though neither staff right now requires health insurance coverage at this time. Expenses have gone from $100 a month to $300 a month for accounting because we've hired a professional accounting firm. Rent payments have gone back to $800 a month. And because we knew that we were going to have money over our budget, we ordered office supplies ahead of time. So that accounts for the $9,570 in that category. And now I'm going to switch to the budget for 2020. Sorry, I have so many screens and tabs open that it can be hard for me to find what I mean to share. And this one's a bit bigger. So here you can see our budget from 2021 and then what our actual ended up being, as well as the 2022 budget. Our 2022 budget of $118,800 is based on what the Finance Committee thinks Wham can realistically raise in 2022. Our estimates in each category are based on our past experiences. And we are not planning on holding a silent auction again this year. We are celebrating Wham's 40th anniversary. And so because of the unusual circumstances this year and the fact that I am neither Marie Braun nor on the finance committee, I'm not going to take questions about this. But if you do have questions about the financial report or the budget, you can call or email the WAMM office and someone will get back to you about that. I know Kristen already mentioned it, but Marie wanted me to also reiterate that the Walk Against Weapons is quickly approaching and that it usually has been one of our biggest fundraisers. So it's a really important one to pay attention to. Our goal this year is to raise $28,000, and we have been able to reach a goal like that in the past by assembling 21 teams that raise about $1,000 or more each. This year, the walk is being held on May 28th at Lake Nokomis. As always, there will be shorter routes available for anyone that can't make the full walk. And Marie hopes that the walk can reach out to people other than WAMM members who are often asked to contribute to a number of our fundraisers. So we ask that our friends and relatives and coworkers and others sponsor us as we walk around Lake Nokomis. But you can also do it in different ways. Some people have set up fundraisers online, used social media, used GoFundMe. Marie also wanted me to mention that we've had a supporter in the past raise money by pledging to pick up trash in her neighborhood because walking around the lake just wasn't her thing. So there's a lot of different ideas. The options are endless if you do want to contribute or you're not local and you can't walk around Lake Nokomis with us. The present and current team members should have received copies of the walk form in the mail. If you're not on a team, you can call the WAMM office. Sorry, my cat is eating my hands right now. You can call the WAMM office or download them on the website. All of the information that you need is on that form. Usually a team is made up of 3 to 4 members. So you split the amount up so it's not too overwhelming. Marie is the coordinator of the teams, and she is looking for some new team members to add some team members to teams that have lost a member or two for various reasons. So if you are not already on a team, we hope that those joining with us and listening today and maybe watching this video later considers joining a team. So you could call the office to do that. And lastly, Marie and I both want to say thank you to everybody for their continued support of WAMM, and just remind you that this walk is one of our biggest fundraisers. So please consider participating or sponsor somebody that is participating. And I think that is all Marie wanted me to do. If anybody thinks I left anything out that also is familiar with the financial reports, feel free to add that in now before I guess I move on to the next thing, because the next thing is me as well. I do not see anybody unmuting themselves, so I'll just take that as a sign that I covered it all. So I wanted to let you all know that we've had an affirmation of change of the WAMM bylaws. The board has approved a change to the WAMM bylaws. Article 5, Section 2, Part A is revised to state that the board of directors consists of a minimum number of 8 people. And now I will pass that off to Joe for the next portion of this meeting.
I get to affirm the WAMM Board of Directors, which I am a member of, and Emma is as well. I'm just going to mention the board members who are renewing, which means they're signing up for, I believe it means they're signing up for another 2 years on the board. And I just have to put in a pitch that it's a really fun, challenging thing to do, but it's very good for one's soul. Renewing are Marie Brown and Joe Schubert, myself. Continuing, which means they're in the midst of their 2-year period, are Diane Hagasag, Sarah Martin, Sarah Olson, Lucia Smith, Emma Schron, Carol Walker. And retiring this year are Joan Allen, Penelope Gardner, and Ann Kierstead. And I want to especially thank the retiring Wham board members for all your work on the board, and we all feel fortunate to have had you with us. And that completes affirmations for the Wham board. And I believe there's only one more thing to do. Do you want to adjourn, Emma?
Sure. And well, I do want to actually say that it looks like we didn't drop too many viewers during this portion of the meeting. So thanks everybody for sticking with us. And we've covered everything that we need to. So we are now going to adjourn the annual business board meeting. Thank you again to our speakers who joined us earlier, and for everybody else for your continued support of Wham. I see Kristen and Joe both waving. I don't know if anybody else wanted to pop on to wave before we close the meeting.